Hello, everybody. We're going to get going very shortly here. So welcome to our webinar on unified IT monitoring around beautiful dashboards and deep reporting or versus deep reporting. I just want to make a few housekeeping notes. There's going to be time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, but if you do have any questions during the presentation, please type them into your Q&A window in the WebEx there, and we'll be able to collect them for the end and prioritize them and hopefully get to all of them. Additionally, this webinar will be posted on our site under resources within a few days, so you will be able to refer back to it in the future. So who am I? My name is Alex Bewley. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Uptime Software. I've been in this role for about 18 years, which essentially means that I've been around a long time, and I'm a little grayer than most. So I've seen a lot of innovation in the systems management space, but I've also had the opportunity to talk to many customers about how they manage their environments and kind of what challenges they face. And really, regardless of the type of innovation, and I'm sure a number of you have seen this, whether it's complex applications or big data, which is relatively new, virtualization, cloud, hybrid, or any combination of these things, there are still very fundamental problems that are occurring around, is it working and why did it break? So dashboards and reporting are two of the ways to kind of monitor and manage your environment. And so without further ado, let's get into the webinar. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about dashboards and sort of the combination of reporting, and really what we're seeing is this sort of dichotomous split between the two of them. So the reason we created this webinar is we've seen a lot of interest in sort of SaaS-based dashboarding solutions, and they've been getting lots and lots of attention. But do they really help solve problems? It's kind of like getting the Coles notes of deeper underlying problems, and we're going to talk about both sides today. Certainly, dashboards, everybody seems to want the war games or NASA-style network operations center look up on their walls, sort of crazy pictures of the world on a huge screen with matrixy-like updates flashing by in real time. Perfect for showing off to customers and senior management. And certainly now that I'm in management, I prefer flashing lights any day of the week when I take a stroll through the data center. There's also been a lot more focus around visualization and how to best represent information in a meaningful format. And certainly I would say this is an awareness that has been brought forth with the rise of big data. There's tons of data out there, but how do you distill it down into something that's very, very meaningful? But this is also a very, very big challenge. The reality is, are you going to spend all day looking at a screen? Although maybe I guess in today's Twitter-oriented society, it's not a big stretch anymore. Dashboards tend to be more sort of immediate gratification. Now, on the reporting side, everybody thinks these things are boring and massive, but if you take them away, then we find there tend to be howls of outrage, because everybody asks when they see lots of data, hey, can I download it in Excel? Can I chart it in a different way? I need to take that data and put it in a planning spreadsheet or a costing spreadsheet, or I don't trust my tool to keep my data forever. I feel much more comfortable if I have my PDF stashed away in my inbox or on my storage somewhere. And certainly, as it turns out, reporting is one of the most often used features of Uptime, and something that we see doesn't exist a lot in SaaS-based solutions, and I'm not entirely sure why. So let's explore both dashboards and reporting. So dashboards first. I kind of want to distill this down into what kinds of dashboards are there. And really the best way to take a look at this is from an IT maturity perspective. I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen the chart here, sort of chaos on the left and IT nirvana on the right. The goal really is just to migrate from being reactive to having some sense of control over your environment, right? And your level of sophistication goes up as you have greater control over your environment. And really, we're kind of mapping the dashboards onto that kind of maturity. So if we take a look at the first kind of dashboard, we would consider it data-oriented, right? So I'm just happy to know what's going on, right? So this would be line charts and graphs of outages and CPU performance, right? And this is the most common kind of dashboard that's seen. Generally, you're just trying to solve a problem and keep on top of it by making it visible. And in a lot of cases, you're just kind of graphing data because you can. The next step up beyond this is, an informative or summary type dashboard, where it's something like, a top 10 consumers or application availability, SLA status. So what differentiates these from the data-oriented is there's some computation which goes into displaying these, right? So top 10 average over last 15 minutes, or fastest growing file systems over the past 24 hours, there's some sort of computation that has to go into this calculation. And I would also classify SLA, or service level agreement dashboards, under this, where you're calculating the availability of an application based on many underlying infrastructure components and their availability. And there's a dividing line here between the first two and the second two. So the first two really are purely IT infrastructure oriented, right? The second two are still IT related, but are flipping more into a business oriented point of view. So the KPI type dashboard, or key performance indicator, is you're tying into business metrics, and this would be something like number of customers subscribed, or number of calls made to a call center that weren't dropped, or number of viewers in a video, something along that line. And these vary by business, right? So while infrastructure is mostly the same, no matter what business you're in, so the first two kinds of dashboards is, whether you're a shipping company or a tech company or a media company, they all tend to be the same. But what is important to you as a business will vary quite considerably. And this is where we get into BSM, or business service management dashboards. And these tend to be sort of truly critical business information that are, revenues or global in outlook. They also tend to be more workflow oriented and focus on customers or consumers of your business, right? So this would be things like, can my customers sign up for a service in a reasonable amount of time, right? Or if my customers have requested a particular service, was it actually delivered to them, again, within a reasonable amount of time? And ultimately, it gets harder and harder to build the right dashboards as you get higher up this chain here. And the real reason is, or the reasons that we tended to see is, you have to get people to articulate what's important to them. And certainly in the business world, what is important to you? And that's a skill that's really, really hard to find. And when you start to get into the business processes, it means that you may not necessarily be able to monitor them all the time. And also I found, as soon as you get people involved in process, that's when things get really, really hard to track and monitor. Common things that we've seen, right, is as people are moving up to the dashboard complexity, they'll say, hey, I need 100 metrics. Okay, well, why do you need 100 metrics? It's the diligent IT person. Well, we just do, right? Turns out there might only be 4 critical ones, and the rest will never be looked at, right? So, I've seen cases where people just randomly remove metrics from monitoring tools, and no one actually ever seems to notice. So you kind of have to ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve, right? Especially when there are cases where you may have hundreds of applications, some of them very mission critical. How do you distill what's important? So what roles use dashboards? Right? So again, we've kind of categorized the types of dashboards that you can create that have some meaning. So now, who are these dashboards actually for, right? So IT operations, the people who are responsible for keeping things running, the what's going wrong now. And I've actually split this into 2 groups. And even though even though the first might not technically be considered operations, i.e. being developers, I've done this because developers of applications can have considerable impact on how operations actually runs, and also because of the rise in popularity of DevOps. Right? This is a term that some of you may have had. And DevOps really is a mindset or a framework for quickly building, deploying, and managing applications. There's been a rise in tooling, primarily SaaS-based, to help the DevOps groups. And there's what we find is there's frequent confusion around dashboarding, right? The needs of the developers and the frustrations of operations, right? And that is, developers frequently don't understand the nature of the infrastructure and may not necessarily code in the most reliable and efficient manner. Things are changing all the time. You've got new instances and different kinds of connections to databases, and how do you track all of this in an extremely dynamic environment? And also, developers are looking to solve different problems, right? What's wrong with my code right now, and where and why? The operations people tend to have a far more, of a holistic view of an environment. An IT manager from a dashboard point of view is, why does this keep happening to me, and how, right? Who do I go to run off and fix this? How do I tiger team this? And certainly what we've seen, a recurring theme is, who's lying to me, right? So this tends to be more prevalent when there are multiple teams under an IT organization, the ubiquitous finger pointing, right? So an IT manager is like, what, I don't particularly care, I just need to have it fixed. So the last two, are different kinds of consumers of dashboards, right? The line of business. And when I say line of business, I mean the actual consumers of the applications, right? And these tend to not be IT people, right? This would be the marketing groups or the sales groups. So their only question is, and what they want to see on a dashboard is, are my apps running, right? So I don't care how many nibbles or gigabytes or whatever my app's done. Is it working? And can my customers use it? And is the response time reasonable? Some pretty simple questions, right? And at the highest level, at the CXO level, it's dollar impacting dashboards, right? Are all my key dollar generating systems running well? Are we providing good service? Are things being fixed before they impact service? Can we actually know things are going wrong before our customers do? Can we plan and procure for growth? Ultimately, the CIO just wants to know if he's going to have a good day or a bad day. So in terms of consuming your dashboards, how are you actually going to build them and understand them? And really, what we're trying to get to here is that data for the sake of data isn't very useful, right? So what you want to be able to do is have a discussion around key business metrics, right? So, and what these possibly are. And I found that IT people frequently get them wrong, right? So there's, over the years, I've seen constant turmoil over what are relevant metrics, and what is important to IT is not always important to the business. We'll talk about this a little bit later. I've got a sample dashboard. But an example would be, if a database node fails in a cluster, the application is most likely still running, albeit perhaps in a degraded state. But that doesn't mean it's an issue for the business. It's a really big issue for IT because you've got to go fix something, and pronto. But, reporting on database availability to the business might not be a relevant metric. All you're really doing is inciting some pain because the application is still running, and the business doesn't care that one of the nodes is blown out, right? And so, this one is something you really kind of have to watch out for. Also, what I found is, an application isn't always an application, right? And I've seen this, when we talk to our sales groups, when we talk to prospects, when we talk to customers. I almost want to say there are capital A applications and then there are infrastructure applications. And really, what I mean here is, we should define an application or capital A application as being business-focused and business-consumed technology. For example, Oracle or SQL Server or Exchange, I consider those infrastructure, right? And they're very important to monitor. They mean lots to IT and to keep them under control. But they have applications running on top of them, right? So what you really care about, for example, is if SQL Server fails, a line of business user wouldn't really care per se, but if their customer billing app that sits on top of SQL Server goes down, then they would care. So as you're dashboarding, as you're building out your monitoring, try and think about the difference between capital A applications and then regular infrastructure type applications. And again, I only bring this one up because it seems to be a very common theme in discussions. So examples here. So I just want to go through a few sample dashboards from the data-oriented to the BSM type, just to give you an idea of what they're all about. This is by no means comprehensive, but it's a small sample of dashboards that I've broken down by the types that I mentioned a few slides ago. So here's a data dashboard. It's very pretty, it's very useful for IT operations, has lots of pretty pictures, and looks good on a screen or a large screen TV. It also demos very well. So on this chart, we've got key network bandwidth metrics, which are the charts in sort of the lower right-hand side, for an internet backbone. We have total CPU consumption, which you can see in the top right. Total storage consumed by a SAN, along with some summary monitoring status information, right? So does this mean anything to, a line of business holder or a line of business owner? Not really, because there's nothing that they can pick at that actually means anything to them. From an IT point of view, absolutely, right? You want to know if things are running at capacity or if things are at overcapacity or if you're about to run out of capacity. Again, not something you would show a business user. This next series of dashboards here, so we're crawling up the chain a little bit, right? We're getting, top-end consumers of information. So in the left-hand chart here, we're starting to see, aggregate summary information. So I think this one is, that's right, this one is VMware instances on a particular box, right? The top right, we're starting to see network flows and an idea of traffic over a portal, right? In the bottom right, we're starting to get summary information of application status and synthetic transactions and some sense of topology. So there's a little bit more work going into these dashboards, and they're becoming a little bit more sophisticated in terms of helping you identify what's going on in your environment. The next step up here is a topology dashboard. So not necessarily a topology of your network per se, but the topology of an application. So what we're starting to see here now is a breakdown of, on the left, consumers of the application flowing through to load balancers, application portals, databases, and then perhaps a branch to a separate application, right? So this one is illuminating in terms of, okay, rather than just a list of systems that exist out there, I'm starting to get some kind of understanding of a relationship between the systems. But we still don't actually necessarily understand what the transactions flows are through an application, right? Is this particular environment supporting 1 or 2 transactions or 100 different kind of transactions? What is actually going on in the environment? And talking about what's happening in terms of failures, right? So in a few levels of this application here, we can see there are load balancers, and then there are clusters, right? So there are clusters in many spots. There are 3 systems in each one of these. So if a node blows up or goes into a degraded state, the application probably won't be affected, right? The load balancers will take care of that. So again, on your other dashboards, you will have to have action items for your IT people to go fix clusters in the node. But from a business point of view, things may or may not be impacted, right? So what do we really need beyond this dashboard? What would be great is a prioritized list of transactions and their success rates and durations. This is also known as end-to-end monitoring. It can also be addressed through synthetic transactions starting at the leftmost side. Right, so here we have customer service users or customer self-care. How do we actually simulate a transaction going through the entire system? So for example, at a CSR level, I trigger one transaction, and it actually flows all the way through from the top or from the left to the right and exercises the entire system. And you can get an idea of the timing of that as well. So just as a small example here, we can see on this particular chart at the left, bottom left, that the transaction count, we could see it ramp up during the day, and then there was something critical that went on late in the afternoon or early evening. It's only about 6 or 8 minutes long, but something went wrong. So how do you actually visualize that and show that in a meaningful way? Now, the last dashboard I have here has got some KPIs and BSM information. So what makes this chart higher level? right? Well, there actually isn't any infrastructure listed at all on this chart, and yet all of it is very dependent on infrastructure metrics, right? So if we take a look at this one, we have under order processing KPIs, we have some latency metrics and some transaction time metrics. But the key to this chart, or the key to this dashboard, is the breakdown and isolation of these business metrics, right? Such as order queue, payment verification, inventory check, order confirmation, right? These metrics are key to making money and the key to keeping customers happy. So somebody, not necessarily in IT, has specifically identified what's important to them. However, they need the involvement of IT to extract and display the metrics. And again, having said this, it's a really hard thing to do, and it requires ongoing cooperation between business and IT. This is a challenge for most people, certainly when you're coming up through the IT side of things. And again, this is further complicated by lines of business may not necessarily know what they can extract out of their applications. There are frequently black box applications or third-party applications, and it may not be possible to extract meaningful metrics out of this. So it's a constant negotiation for what's going on and how do you figure out how to monitor it and extract relevant metrics. So dashboards for pros and cons. All right, so on the pro side, there are so many examples that we have of senior IT or CIO staff that have big screen TVs in their offices with dashboards. It's kind of like IT voyeurism. But at the end of the day, it's a sense of security, right? Or keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on, right? So the reality may be you're still sitting on a pile of dynamite, but at least you have some sense of when it's going to blow. And again, the dashboards are great for non-technical users to get a sense of what's going on. Now the cons are, dashboards can't be used for analysis, right? They truly are real time, and if things are broken, you can see it in real time, but the ability to go back and do forensic analysis or really understand root causes is a little bit lost. And additionally, if the dashboards are focused on the wrong kind of metrics, then people are just going to get confused and frustrated with the data that's being presented. So on the whole, dashboards are really quite cool, but now let's look at reporting. So reports are a switch in mindset, and I like reports, right? We have lots of customers using reports on a regular basis. In fact, we have customers that have years of data for thousands of systems, and it amounts to terabytes of information. And and generally I think about, okay, well, why would you actually do that? I mean, for compliance purposes, do you actually look at the data? And really what we found is the reports are used or this data is used for analysis, via the reporting. And what we find is people are really trying to compile performance and availability data, over recurring time periods and look at them over a long period of time. And the most common cases that we see are certainly around capacity planning, right? So answering simple questions like how much have we grown, what hasn't been used, or when will we run out? Again, relatively simple questions, but now multiply it times 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 systems. This becomes a very administratively demanding question to answer. Cost management. When can we decommission hardware? Do we virtualize it? Although this has more been replaced nowadays with, can we put it in the cloud, or does it make sense to put it in the cloud? Can we cost effectively do that? We also see people running very large week-end or month-end reporting for distribution to end users, right? And this generally is around capacity and availability reporting. And what we've seen is a very common report that's distributed on a monthly basis is the SLA report, which generally shows how applications have been performing. And I say this is capital A applications, right, not infrastructure. And really this is the moment of truth for IT to the line of the business. And here we find that transparency in this area is very, very effective for an ongoing productive relationship between IT and the business. And I have a little comment on SaaS here. I just want to make a small comment here. And it's not really a competitive doc per se, but what we found is lots of SaaS offerings in the systems management space are really weak on the reporting side of things. Great on dashboards, but very weak on reporting. And ultimately, I think this is more around product maturity, right? It's when you come into the enterprise customers want reports. It's just how they work, right? And so that is the importance of reporting. It's a very ingrained corporate means of distributing information. So much like we had consumers of dashboards, who are the consumers of reports? Ultimately, it's the same set of personalities: your IT operations, your IT managers, your lines of business, and your CXO. And one of the things that we found is, and this is somewhat interesting, certainly around the capacity management side, and it ties to just how overloaded system administrators and IT staff are. Right, as we found that admins will do reporting, or they'll be responsible for running the applications, and they'll say, you know what, I'll just make sure it's running. I'm going to provide you with the reporting around performance and availability. You have to go figure out when you need to upgrade it, when you need to grow. Right? We're so busy just keeping everything running. We will try and keep a step ahead by providing you with the information required for you to understand your environment. Also, what we found is psychologically reports are used differently, right? Reports get read. It shows up in your inbox. We're very inbox-triggered people. Right? It shows up in your inbox. You'll read it, but generally you'll forget to go and check a portal, right? So, and people like to see the data, right? And also, one of the things that we find a lot around reporting is people will ask for Excel data. People love to tap into the data and pull it out or make it part of a larger reporting spreadsheet, right? And if that data is not available, it becomes very hard to aggregate with other kinds of business metrics. So what are examples around reporting, right? Why is reporting important, right? So ultimately, it's certainly from an IT operations point of view, it's forensics, right? So the CSI of IT, well, we weren't watching that, right? Let's go figure out what went wrong, right? What triggered this cascading outage or something in that vein, right? And with reporting, it's very easy to share the data with many different kinds of people on the team. From a capacity planning point of view, right? It's what we're seeing is people will generate batch reports and blast them out to a series of users, right? So you don't have to enable access to your monitoring tool to a large community of users. What you can actually do is just have reports automatically generated. We actually have an example of one administrator for about 3,000 systems, but what they do is they actually blast out reports on capacity to 75 different line of business users, right? It's a great way to share massive amounts of information with minimal effort, which is really what's important. Summary growth, right? So, how do you, storage management is a very big issue with customers, and reporting is a great way to summarize, usage by platform, application, or user, right? Again, no one is going to think to go to a dashboard to check their storage, but if someone proactively comes after them and says, look, you know what, you are growing at a much faster rate than you should, here's the background information to support that, what do you want to do about it? And certainly SLAs, right? Because SLAs are by nature long in duration, being able to view the availability of many applications over time, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, this becomes an ideal reporting function because you want to compare and see, over long periods of time, are we getting better? Are we maintaining the service that we need to? So over the next few slides, I'm going to highlight a few reports. Again, so in levels of sophistication here, right? So here's the most basic kind of report, and sometimes it's just useful to know when things blow up, right? And many people have told us that they have so much infrastructure, their greatest challenge is simply to figure out if everything is working or anything is working at any given point in time. And this one kind of hit home. I was recently chatting with a company, and they'd had over about 6 or 7 years the portfolio of HP products, right? And they actually joke. They said, we have every acronym of HP product. synthetic transaction monitoring, manager of managers, all this kind of thing. And yet at the end of the day, they still couldn't tell the line of business owner if their systems were up and running. So quite literally, they just threw everything out and started from scratch. Now they made an interesting decision and they said, look, you know what? Rather than not alert on the right things, we are just going to let everything go wrong and then selectively tune from there, which is kind of an interesting take on refining your system or jumping from chaos to organization. This report here is very dense, and I know it looks a little bit ugly. It shows some historical information and deltas around sort of file system capacity growth. And really, the intent here is not to try and dissect this report for you, but file system capacity is really boring. But what blows me away is that running out of disk space is the most common reason for application downtime. In fact, if you look at a lot of customer dashboards, the most common alert that you see bubbling up to the top of the environment is file system capacity related, right? This is one of those things which, it happens in cloud, it happens in virtualized environments, it happens all over the place, and it's one of those amazing things. So I've shown this one because it's one of those ones that requires weekly or monthly review, just in terms of, well, what really are we consuming, and is it going to impact our applications? This report here, the last one I have, is a service level agreement report broken down by service level objectives. And what this report shows is the total sum of monitoring outages for a given application and rolls them up into an aggregate total, right? So again, I'm talking about a capital A application, which is comprised of many different pieces of infrastructure. So if you can remember back to that dashboard, which had about, I think it was about 30 or 35 systems on it with the load balancers and whatnot. So, that's a lot of infrastructure, but it's actually one application, right, with a handful of business critical transactions. So you would have all the 30 pieces of infrastructure, all the processes, all the disk, all the CPU, all the Oracle and WebSphere and all that kind of stuff. But it rolls up into one or two key transactions. And really what you can see here is I've got small outage, right? So various components of the system can be out or down for short periods of time, but really you need to look at it at a more macro level, right? And so lots of little outages spread across various bits of the infrastructure can add up to very big outages across the entire application, right? And really this is very, very key. This is where you have to understand your dependencies in your applications. And I don't know if this example is apocryphal or not, but I heard of a large IT system where there are 5 major components, and according to IT, all 5 had really good availability. It fit within our maintenance windows, it fit within our service level agreements of 98% or whatever it was. However, each of the 5 didn't work at the same time, so the outages actually rotated. So no part of the system actually really worked at any given point in time. And yet from an IT point of view, well, hey, it kind of works, right? So this is where, that example is almost bordering on not true, but it can be somewhat believable, right? That's what happens in IT when we start to focus on the weeds. So how do we get the best of both worlds, right? And how do we get killer dashboarding, as we see in the SaaS world, with really deep reporting, right? Especially when you need to satisfy developer community, an operations group, IT management, and a business consumer, right? It's all different objectives, different mindsets, different levels of tolerance. It's pretty hard, right? And certainly from our point of view, Uptime gets you a lot of the way there. So what's out there, right? There are 2 kinds of solutions really. One is SaaS-based and the other is on-premise. But even the SaaS-based solutions are on-premise because you still need a data collector, an appliance, or call home agents. Also, a lot of the SaaS solutions don't support some of the more non-standard platforms such as Solaris, AIX, or HPUX. And then there's the on-premise versions or tools like Uptime. So everything is on site, but total flexibility around reporting and dashboarding, including pulling data directly from the tool for customized reporting, which a lot of people do. So in terms of evaluating a solution, right, you need to take a step back and really analyze what you're trying to do, right? Sometimes just getting in a tool to collect metrics and availability data from all your different platforms and building these into application availability reports, so capital A applications. This is a really good first step, right? It's not super complicated. It's just getting you that baseline data that you need to understand, are things working, right? And can I aggregate them and present them in a way, either through reports or either through dashboards in a meaningful manner. And certainly, as you get more sophisticated, just ensure that your tool is ready for you to grow into it. And then, how do you manage more complicated environments, more complex environments, right? And this one's tough, right? And we've found that, there are vendors that specialize in cloud-based offerings, and they're very, very solid, but they're also unable to come into the data center, or if they have come into the data centers via the development groups, which tends to freak out operations when they're not involved. So, you have this conflicting tool set where, SaaS comes from the outside in, it's, application performance oriented, it's developer focused, and yet you have, your entire data center and enterprise applications with all of the tooling that you have there. How do you actually harmonize these two worlds? And I would say it's not done terribly well. So that's something to look out for, right? Is what is more important to you? Do I need to understand what's going on solidly in my data center and have a vendor that can come from within to without, or the other way around? So obviously, this being a presentation by Uptime Software, we have to have one small slide on Uptime Software. Really, I just want to give a quick summary here. We monitor the entire enterprise system stack, right? So from business services through applications all the way down to your network. So we are an infrastructure monitoring tool that supports the IT maturity curve as you move up into applications. And one of the things, again, that's really important to understand is you need to be able to do this across heterogeneous environments, right? So if you are a business that has on-premise servers and you're starting to virtualize, or more than likely you have virtualized, and they're starting to move into the cloud, we're there to essentially provide you and help you manage these complex environments and provide you with all of the higher level dashboarding and reporting that you need. So in conclusion here, I just want to fire off some next steps to you, and I will come to the Q&A right after this. Is definitely set up a one-on-one customer demo or custom demo. We have demo sales at Uptime Software put in here. If you could actually just email sales. Demo sales is being a little bit moody right now. You can give us a call, or you can actually download a trial version of the software from the site. It's very quick to get a hold of. You get a license key and you can evaluate it right away. Or we do have a live demo portal that you can step into and without installing anything actually understand what's going on. So I'm going to go offline for about 15 seconds here and quickly peruse the Q&A, and then I will come back and answer your questions for you. Okay, so I'll answer some questions here. I'm going to start off with the very easy one. Will you share the slides after the show? Absolutely. We will we'll post them in the on the resources page. I have a question here. Is it possible to group different kinds of services, i.e. servers, applications, and interfaces, to a single dashboard icon and setting distinct alert thresholds on this? Absolutely, right? So in this particular case, I will talk about uptime, right? So what you want to do in this case is group, a server application interface into what we consider or what we call an application monitor, right? So which is a composite or a buildup of various kinds of monitors. So you would have lower level infrastructure monitoring, for your server, right? Can I ping it? Is it alive? Is the CPU, usage within this limit? Is memory within this limit? Is my file system capacity okay? From an interface point of view, what's the throughput on these network switches or network ports, applications, right? Is my WebSphere there? Is my MySQL or Oracle or SQL Server or whatever? So, you can have many tens of different kinds of monitors, and then you can essentially build this up into an application monitor. And then you can actually get a little bit more sophisticated from there and kind of designate what you consider truly representative of the availability of this application, right? So you can add synthetic transaction monitors to the application, right? So as long as I can always do these 2 or 3 transactions within this certain period of time, it's working, right? Outages within or getting close to running out of file system capacity will trigger alerts for operations to go and fix, but will not impact the overall availability of the application unless it actually really does go down. Sorry, just reading the next one here. I am sorry. Here's another one. Do you provide any integration with SIEM products to facilitate the flow of monitoring data into the SIEM data repository? So this is more security and event management. And ultimately, Uptime, we do have quite a defined API in addition to plug-in capabilities where we can inject all kinds of either application status or performance or whatever you would consider a relevant event, and then inject this into another system. Certainly, things like whether it's you're using something like Splunk or Logstash, or I know Symantec has a whole series of products around this. So certainly we can integrate there. And what I would do is just send an inbound email to sales, and they can put you in touch with a solution architect to help you deal with this. Another one here, this is a very technical question. I'm trying to configure database monitoring. Do I need an agent or not? Ultimately, this completely depends on what database. The answer 99% of the time is no, you don't need an agent. There's all sorts of ways that we talk to the various databases and extract the relevant metrics. And I think that's kind of it for the questions that I've been forwarded here. So I want to thank everybody very much for their time. And as I say, please contact sales or download a demo. And thanks again for your time.